share thy music, share our wonder in thy love. Lift our hearts on wings of gladness to thy light above, to thy light above.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to see you all.
All of you.
Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful technology.
Yes, to be able to be here in Italy at 7 o'clock in the morning and to be with all of you for this Sunday service, it's a joy. We're so happy to be able to connect with all of you in this way.
It's pouring down rain here and gray outside, and we were a little bit concerned because sometimes when it rains hard, our signal isn't so good, but it looks like things are working fine, so nice to be with you all.
So I'm going to read. The reading for this morning is How Devotees Rise. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. Last week we asked the question, why do devotees fall? And we considered the downfall of Judas in this context. Jesus, in answer to Judas's criticism for allowing Mary to rub his feet with spikenard, a very costly ointment, said, "The poor you have always with you, but me you have not always." Jesus is saying here that there is one supreme injustice that needs eradication. Poverty, yes, but not of a material kind. Poverty in a spiritual sense. Divine blessings are not common in this world. They are extraordinary. When they come, we should give them priority above all other considerations. Never allow a moment of inner joy, for instance, to be set aside for lesser duties. Divine attunement is our highest priority. As Lahiri Mahashaya, the Guru of Yogananda's Guru, said, to listen to the heart's inner sound, Om, which issues from the very center of our being, is man's highest duty. Mary, on this occasion, was not communing in inner silence with Christ's Spirit, as she had been when Martha urged Jesus to reproach her for not helping out in the kitchen. Mary this time was serving outwardly, but in a very different spirit from the restless fussing for which Jesus had reprimanded her sister Martha. Those who see a radical difference between the paths of action and meditation should understand this distinction. To serve in the right spirit is necessary, for only thereby can we overcome our karmic tendencies toward restless activity. The important thing is that spirit be always inwardly focused, that in everything we do, we act in loving service to the Lord. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says in the 3rd chapter, the state of freedom from action, that is, of eternal rest in spirit, cannot be achieved without action. No one, by mere renunciation and outward non-involvement, can attain perfection. Whenever the Spirit of God descends upon you, however, remember the words of Jesus. Me you have not always with you. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
This reading started off by saying what we did last week. Did you guys also cover that same reading last week?
Yes.
So I wanted just to return there for a second in order to tie these two readings together. The Bhagavad Gita says if one ponders on sense objects, there springs up attraction for them. From attraction grows desire, from desire anger, from anger infatuation, etc. So the Bhagavad Gita last week and this week both still talk about that state of freedom. And so I wanted to just talk this morning. First of all, I need to ask, how much time do we have together?
As much as you like.
But normally?
We would normally end an hour from now. But
okay.
You can, so in other words, you don't have to go that long.
Okay.
We don't want you to miss breakfast.
Okay. No, that's okay. We're okay too for time, but just to give me a time frame. So the interesting thing about our path and about what these teachings actually are saying is that freedom lies, and especially this morning, freedom lies in reaching that still state, that actionless state. And so we hear a lot about how to serve, but what Swami was saying this morning is a very important point, because how we grab or how we keep those periods where we finally touch inner peace and inner silence, that's one of the most important things we can do. And it was an interesting choice of words that Swami used this morning when he said that eternal state of actionless, or of that eternal state of peace. And it reminds me what Master said about Gyanamata, that he saw her slip into the watchful state. And that for me is a very inspiring part of our path, that you don't hear a lot of conversation in the spiritual circles in the world about that state of watchfulness and about what the real state of inner communion or of spiritual ecstasy is. And so I wanted to touch it from 2 points this morning, because on the one hand now we have science that's saying that they realize that there is a consciousness behind the atom. They call it non-locality and they call it entanglement. You're probably all familiar with the latest terms of quantum physics, but the point is that there's very interesting concepts involved there that even though science doesn't say it, we can take that and understand it on a deeper level, because our teaching adds something to that scientific side. The fact is that they've discovered that non-locality is vibrationlessness. It is without vibration. It is a static state of consciousness. So it's behind the atom, and that's why it's so difficult for them to actually seize on it. But they see what it does by allowing the atoms to communicate with each other. They see that it exists, but is vibrationalist. So they're used to looking at the atom and all its vibration and all of its energy. Well, our consciousness, Master said, even our dreams are also vibration. Our thoughts are vibration. But what isn't vibration is the part of you and me that says, I am. The observer, the eternal state of the soul exists outside of the atoms. So Master said it this way: Satchidananda exists whether the universe does or does not exist. What is the soul? What are you and me? So the soul is, according to Master's definition, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss, individualized. So we're exactly that same thing. The part of you and me that says, I am, exists in a vibrationless state, a non-vibrating state. Everything in vibration and in existence, in material existence, vibrates. And therefore, it's mortal. And everything in the universe exists between two poles of birth and death. Galaxies, suns, and moons all have a birth, a life, and a death. But the soul exists whether the universe does or does not exist. So Master went on to say Satchidananda is formless, it is vibrationless, it is eternal. So that's why, even though science won't look at it subjectively, they won't go for the experience. Science will measure non-locality or Satchidananda, but the spiritualist is how Master called it in his back in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. The spiritualists will try to experience that. And so what is it that Patanjali actually says we need to do? The mind is totally associated with this body. We're used to breathing, we're used to eating, we're used to interaction. All of the appetites, or as Swami said, we're associated with this bundle of self-definitions. But behind the whole vibrating realm of the body and the atoms, the sun, the moon, the air, the noise, the silence, but behind it all is the non-vibrating, static realm of consciousness, which you and I, as eternal beings, are part of. And so when the Gita, or when the scripture talks about resting in that eternal peace or that eternal silence, and when Patanjali says the mind is associated so much so with this mortal body and everything that's involved with it, so Patanjali's answer is very simple: how that the soul can never act directly in the body because the mind filters our true nature. And so the mind never allows a true image or vision. And so what's the key? Patanjali says the key is simply to calm the mind. And so this is very exciting when I found this, but Master says you can calm the mind and make it just like a blank photographic plate. And he said, and when you learn to do that and maintain that state as long as you want to, not just to touch it, because most of us understand that's the huge frustration with meditation, is that we can focus the mind. We might touch calmness, thoughtlessness, for maybe just a couple of seconds. We joke here often about the fact that I resolve that I'm going to be single-pointed, and something a bird outside catches our ear, 10 seconds later, often, our mind can already be off, can already be spinning on something else. So it can take a lifetime to develop the ability to go into the kind of silence that Master's talking about, where not a thought dare to cross the bars of your silence, or not a sound dare to cross. So he's saying, really, put ourselves in a prison of silence where nothing else is allowed to penetrate or to enter in. And in that state, when we finally learn to keep that state of silence, then he said, you can receive the picture of the thought of another person. He said, that's how he called it walkie-talkie. That's how I do walkie-talkie with my disciples and with my devotees, is he learned to know the thoughts of others because he could see them on the calm inner photographic plate of his mind. And he said, when you learn to do that, but when you learn to do that and keep that state for as long as you want to, you have the control, not to touch it for a minute, but to actually develop to where you hold that at any time that you want. Then he said, you can even put the atom on that blank photographic plate of your mind. He said, it's not enough to study the atom, you must become the atom. You can become anything you want, because everything in the universe is an aspect of God's consciousness. And that's why we can commune first in creation. You can be in the light, behind the atom, behind everything that is coming from God's consciousness, from Satchitananda, from an ocean of cosmic consciousness. So we're on the edge of a very exciting time today in respect to science and in respect to metaphysics, because when I grew up, I always thought, well, what is spirit? We would of course would ask that question because we were taught in school that there are animate objects and inanimate objects. And so we were taught that the rocks were an inanimate object, but a mammal was an animate object. But now we know that consciousness even exists in the rocks. So everything, especially from our teachings, we know that everything is an aspect or a dream aspect of cosmic consciousness. So the rock is vibrating an aspect of consciousness in the same way that these bodies are. But the sense of I exists behind all of that. So that is a reflection of the cosmic consciousness. I am ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. I exist whether the universe does or does not exist. I am formless in nature. I am thoughtless in nature. I am an aspect of the great observer. I am an eternal observer. So the fact that we exist, the sense of I exists behind the vibrating sphere of creation, is why we can say we are immortal. So maybe some of you have heard there's a particular recording where Master says, where Yogananda says, go into the light behind the atoms. That's where the great God remains. And then he says, that's where we've come from. We've descended from that ocean of consciousness, but we cannot be touched by anything in this world. In this vibrating world, we should always seek to come back and feel and touch that sense of I am eternal existence itself. Nothing can touch us. So I feel a great kinship or a bond with all of you, with everybody, all of our devotees in this world, because we're all trying to touch the very exact same thing, the ocean of consciousness behind our thoughts and behind our bodies. And there is a union there. That is the kind of union that Master talked about. That's the kind of union that Sri Yukteswar wanted to help Master discover and to touch. That is the message of all of these masters, is that there is this state of ecstasy that exists, and it's an eternal state of ecstasy. For example, Master said, never think that you have experienced the ultimate ecstasy. Keep on going through eternity, and Master said, Spirit will show you veil after veil, endless manifestations of its ever-new joy. So that's what eternity is. It's not about an incarnate necessarily. It's not necessarily about an incarnation after incarnation after incarnation. It can be that if we have the freedom to realize that we're not caught in it. But most of us are just bound to this eternal, or seemingly eternal, cycle of reincarnation, bodies after bodies, experiences like this in this world. But what the Masters are saying is there is a vast and wonderful kingdom behind, in fact, Master called it another universe behind what we experience now. It's a little bit like that wonderful story that Master says that there's this frog that lived in this big and wonderful lake, and one day he hears this croaking over the hill, and he hops out of his big lake and he hops over the hill, and this little tiny little pond, it's full of frogs. They're so crowded, they're all stacked on top of each other practically. And he says, oh, come over, come with me. There's this big, beautiful lake. And one frog says, well, how big? This big? And he makes a jump. And no, it's much bigger. It's incredibly big. You mean this big? And the frog jumps as big as he could, as long as he could go. No, you can't even see the other side. Well, that just put them over the edge. They couldn't even believe that such a place existed, and he had to run for his life. And that's the story of the Masters, is that nobody believes what they're trying to teach them or what they're trying to tell them, that there is this ocean of consciousness, an ocean of spirit, an ocean of bliss, an ocean of light is the way Master said it. And when you touch that light, you know you are eternal. It's Jesus said it in a similar way. They shall see his name, they shall hear his name, and his name shall be in their foreheads, and there shall be no night there, nor do you need the light of a candle or the light of the sun, for the Lord God giveth you light, and ye shall reign forever and forever. And that's, Master said, that's the way that Christ was describing that, was so that we could understand that when you see that light, then you know your eternal self. Then you shall reign forever and forever. That's what that was Christ's way of describing that we know that we are immortal. And how do we do that? Jesus said, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. But the Masters say it in a very similar way. The yogis say it in a very similar way. When the mind is deeply calm, the inner light spontaneously appears. And that's why Patanjali says we have to calm the mind. We all have the advantage of Kriya, because Master said if any energy goes down the spine and into the body, there's no way the mind can be totally still. It's like a flicker. Master said even a flicker, like the flicker of a candle flame, even a mental flicker is enough to keep God away. Now, I don't say that to discourage us. It just shows us what we need to do for our realization, is that we need to just work at sinking into that watchful state. to that deep state of rest in spirit that Swami described in today's reading. That's how devotees rise, is to really grab that state of consciousness. So it's very good to serve the way we do, and to serve without the sense of I, and it does help us. To serve really does help us to get ourselves out of the way. I remember many times when someone would really have a lot of problems, Swami would say, well, stop thinking about yourself. Just serve others. Let the energy of God's grace flow through you, but don't turn it back. There's another wonderful story that you probably will hear in our Sunday readings, I think, at some point. But there was a great saint who healed everybody in the village, and he was well known and famous for that. And then at a certain point, he also became ill. And the villagers said, well, why don't you ask God to heal you? And he thought, well, yeah, okay, maybe I can. So he prayed to God for his healing. And God said, but shame on you. I've given you have by ecstasy, you have the ability to serve others. Why would you turn that back on yourself? And Swami finished that story by saying, it's helpful if we say this one truth, but you can hear it two ways. You can say it this way: isn't it wonderful how God loves me? Or you can say, isn't God's love wonderful? Now see, the second one doesn't turn it back toward you. You are a channel of God's love. Isn't God's love wonderful? That's much better than saying, isn't it wonderful how God loves me? Yes, it is wonderful how God loves me, but we want to be sure that we just do it as a channel, because in that way, Spirit can show us endless manifestations of its ever new joy. But we have to get ourselves out of the way and be a channel for that grace and a channel for that bliss. And then we take that step beyond littleness. Just what Patanjali was saying, the mind will associate with just the littleness of the body, but if we can transcend that mind, literally just stop it, then the inner light of the soul, the inner knowledge of the soul can shine, and we know ourselves to be an aspect of cosmic consciousness. And just to finish, so Master said it this way, you must develop that silence. And he said, and in that silence you shall behold the universe as if in a mirror. So really, our little individualized Satchidananda is just a mirror of cosmic consciousness. And we can mirror, we can reflect a little bit if we're totally associated with I, me, mine, or we can reflect the whole universe as if in a mirror, is the way Master said it. It's not as so vast if we think of it as a reflection. If we think of it as that we are a drop in the ocean, and once we melt in the ocean, then this is the beauty of Master's teaching, something I've never heard in any other, or never heard any other explanation, but that's the answer for how we can be the knower, the knowing, and the known all in one. That state of samadhi, because many scriptures or many philosophies think that we lose our sense of self once you become one with Spirit, because then you're one with everything. So how can you have an individual awareness? But Master said it's the memory of every incarnation we've ever had that allows us still to have that sense of I in the ocean of cosmic consciousness. And Master said there's no greater ecstasy that you can ever have than that state of feeling that little the little sense of I merge with the great light of spirit. And that's our goal, and that's the rest in spirit that Krishna and Yogananda and Christ talk about, is to melt in that ocean of spirit. But we have to, like I said before, sink into this state of watchfulness, of the observer, where it doesn't matter. I will do my best in this world, I will serve, but I can never be touched by what happens in this world, because I am the eternal self itself. I am eternal existence itself. This is like a dream. And how many dreams, we wake up, we say, what a wonderful dream, and then it's gone. And right in front of us is another experience, another dream, another experience. And we do it for eternity. So, but when we know that it's a dream, that's when Master said, that's the ecstasy, that you know you're eternal, but you can have any experience in the realm of cosmic consciousness that God wants to give you. But we know we can never be touched. We can never be harmed. We are eternal existence itself. So it's a wonderful scripture, it's a wonderful teaching, and it's a wonderful line of masters that gives us these teachings that allows us to know who we truly are. So we are in family with you. We have today, after this, we also have our Sunday service here. We have many guests this weekend, so the temple will be full, and we're all on the same page, all trying to just find who we are, what we're doing in this incarnation, what is the purpose of this life, and we know it. We have the answers. We're very fortunate in that way to be involved with a line of realized masters, because it's really about finding who I am, this sense of I am, but not I am this body, but we can take it to the most expanded state, and every answer to every question you have is there in that state of spirit and in that state of samadhi. So it is our great pleasure, it is our not only pleasure, it's our good fortune that we share this with you. And I really appreciate the fact that technology allows us to be here with you. And we might come this winter. It's possible that if we come to India, maybe we can also come see you in person. But this is definitely the next best thing. If we can't come, then this is a wonderful way to share. And it's really nice to see you all. And God bless you.
I would just like to add my hope that we will be able to see all of you in person. It is a possibility. We'll come in January, February of 2017. And of course, you are always all very welcome to come and visit us here in Assisi. As you know, Sergio and Mariani are arriving with the group today from India, and we won't see them for a few days, but it is a great joy to be able to come together, also where we actually get to mix our auras with all of our Guru Bhais in America, in India, and here in Europe. So feel always welcome to come, and we hope that we'll see you soon. I'm always very inspired when Anand speaks. He helps us to feel the truth from our gurus, from Swamiji, of that samadhi experience that is within each of us always. And it's not easy for us to really grasp and understand this until we are able to be more constantly in that state. But it's a truth that is important for us to realize, because we have a community here of over 100 souls, and each one of us is trying to live every day as each of you is, manifesting ever more perfectly that state of ever awareness that we all have within us. And we have these layers of emotions, of limitations that cover that perfect state. And I think that Master's dream of World Brotherhood colonies had as its goal, as its purpose, to provide places where more and more each one of us would be able to rise to that perfection that is already within each one of us. And I know that your group that comes together in a very concrete way to serve and to meditate is exactly what Master is hoping that all of us will have. And it's so important for us to realize that we're not doing it just for us, that each one of us who meditates either with the group or on our own is meditating for the rest of the group, for our families, for our friends, for our countries, and for the world. At the end of this Sunday satsang, we will be doing, as you always do, that prayer of Yogananda's for peace and harmony. And it's a very concrete way that each of us can help to manifest that consciousness of peace and harmony that is so needed in today's world. We are all affected by every day in our country, in your country, and in so many countries in this world. There are things that are happening that manifest the opposite of peace and harmony. And each one of us, through this prayer and through our own living of peace and harmony and all of the divine qualities that are within us, we express, we allow to come through us what Anand was talking about, that perfect expression of the divine that is the highest consciousness that exists. And it is our privilege and our duty to try in every way in our lives to bring that expression of ourselves to the fullest, to the utmost. It's very easy when we go home to our daily life, when we go home to our families, our children, when we go home to parents who may be living with us in our homes. Here in Italy, it is also very common for young people to live with younger and older generations in the same home. And not everyone in our families is as aware as we are trying to be. And so, of course, we are challenged in our everyday life to live, even in the most difficult challenges, this consciousness of peace and of harmony, of joy and of divine love. And for all of us, Swamiji was the most direct example of that. I don't know how many of you who we are seeing right now were able to experience Swamiji in person. If so, then you are greatly blessed, as all of us who are here in Italy, and Anand and I especially blessed to have had Swamiji live amongst us and to have seen the way that he would live this divine consciousness in ways that inspire us always to be able to do that more and more in our lives. some of you have heard us speak. Anand and I were with Swami a lot while he was here. He would have us over for tea nearly every day, as I know that he had people for tea when he was living in India. And there was an opportunity. He would have his tea even on his own, so it's not that he needed to have us there to be able to enjoy his cup of tea. But he would invite people in order to share the divine consciousness that he had. And one day, we would often come over in the morning, and Anand would light the fire for him in his fireplace if it was a cool day. And we would often be with him at breakfast. And this one day, he had just fallen during the night, and he had hit his head. And so we were waiting because we needed to take him to the hospital in order to assure that nothing too grave had happened. But it was a serious thing for Swami to hit his head in a fall. And he was sitting at the breakfast table, and he was shaky, because it had been a difficult experience. And he asked Anand to please make him a fresh juice. And in the moment that Anand left, I was there with Swamiji, and I started to say, Swamiji, I'm not happy with Divine Mother. I got no further than that. I wanted to say, when she allows such things to happen to you, because we know how much Swami's life was dedicated. And you think if someone's life is that dedicated, why would such a thing happen? And Swamiji stopped me and he said, don't say it. This body is Divine Mother's, and she can do with it what she wants. Now, this is a lesson for all of us, because what had just happened was not an easy thing. But Swamiji was basically saying with those words a message for all of us, that whatever comes to us in our lives is from Divine Mother, is from God, is from Guru. And that we should accept whatever comes. As he was saying, this body is Divine Mother's. Whatever she wants to do with it is hers to do. And Swamiji lived that in his life. We know that he had struggles along the way, from the time that he was pushed out of his guru's organization to the time that he actually left his body. He had many tests of the body and of the spirit that he always saw as a part of his sharing of the teachings that he had directly from his guru with all of us. And for us, it's very important to have seen how Swamiji lived those challenges, because he was never one to say, woe me, why does this have to happen to me? He could have done that. We all heard him say that Master said to him, his Guru said to him, God will come to you at the end of your life. And Swami could have said, I know what my Guru said. He said I would know God at the end of this life. So I'm just going to sit back and let him come. Swamiji never said or thought such a thing. He could have done that. But what I saw in his life was that, knowing what Master had said, he was not going to let any opportunity to free himself by acting in the right way in every circumstance, by accepting everything that came as an opportunity to be able to live it in the most dharmic way, so that when the end of his life came, he really would be free. Isn't that the most wonderful way to think about living our lives? That each one of us has the opportunity, the possibility to be free at the end of this life. Master said, every one of us can be free at the end of this life. And we can say, who, me? Because we think we know ourselves. And we see that bundle of definitions that Anand was talking about, and we think, I can never be free at the end of this life. I am too caught up in myself. I am too selfish, thinking of myself first. I have all kinds of limiting qualities. How can I possibly think that I will be free at the end of this life? But the topic of this Sunday satsang, how devotees rise, is exactly remembering that we, each one of us, can rise to our highest state of consciousness if we act as Swami was talking about in this reading, because he gives us both the highest expression of service, which is, yes, be active. Yes, Swamiji was anything but inactive in his life. He wrote so many books. He wrote so much music, which you all are singing beautifully. I'm happy to see that Dharmini is doing a wonderful work with each of you who is willing and wanting to share the music that Swamiji has written. Swamiji he was so active in his life, but he was active not in a way that would bring his own actions back to how great he was. He was active in a way that would help each one of us and everyone that he knew understand how to get free, how to rise in our spiritual life, and how to be free at the end of this life. And so every action that he performed was with the consciousness of allowing Master to act through him, of allowing God and Divine Mother to act through him. And this is what our meditation is for. This is what our life together is for, to be able to see in each other a reflection of the divine, and to reflect back to each other the divine. I know that Master's dream of world brotherhood colonies, his pleasure in seeing how many of his devotees are coming together to share, is the fact that we are mirrors, that when we come together, we can mirror back to each other the highest that is within them, that we are able to do that in our families at home, in our work. We are meant to live every moment of our lives mirroring to others their divine self. And Swamiji did this in every way that he possibly could. I remember when I first had the wonderful opportunity to travel with Swamiji, he came to Europe, and I was able to travel with him. And he was speaking in Amsterdam, in Holland, to a group that this was in the end of the 70s. And it was a group of people who were very interested in learning Yogananda's teachings, and having Swamiji there was a great opportunity for them to be able to receive Yogananda's teachings. So I was on stage with Swamiji and therefore able to see the group of people that he was speaking to. And there was one young woman who stood out in an interesting way. I was only a few years on the path, and so perhaps I could be forgiven for what I am about to relate to you and the consciousness that I expressed in that moment. There was one young woman who was very made up. She had a lot of makeup. Her hair she'd obviously been to the hairdresser to have her hair done. She was dressed very, just really with a consciousness of what I saw as self and of ego. So at the end of his talk, Swami, as he often did, wanting to include everyone, said, "We are going to walk to a restaurant, and any of you who would like to come are welcome to come with us." In that 10-minute walk, Swamiji walked with this young woman who stood out in this group as being different and perhaps would not have been seen as someone who was really seeking God. Swamiji walked the whole way with this young woman and others, keeping her next to him, talking to her, asking her about herself, drawing her in to a group that already felt together and helping her to feel a part of that group. And I remember feeling Swamiji will always draw in to oneness the person who might feel least part of that oneness. And it's such an important lesson for me because I had separated her from the rest of the group by her differentness. And Swamiji immediately pulled her in. And Swamiji did that with everyone. He was always able to help each individual see what was the highest in them and be inspired to express that in whatever way they were able to in that moment. He was able to draw out of each one of us the highest that is within us. Swamiji has been gone for several years from his body. And in our community, I see each person striving to reflect what Swamiji told them at some point was in them. He would actually say to people, "You know what you are able to give, and I want to see you giving that to each person that comes to this community at Assisi as a guest, and to every one of the members of your spiritual family. Each one of you is able to live the light, to live divine love, to live bliss." And that is what he would always ask of each one of us. And that is, of course, what he expressed in his own life. I'm going to give Anand an opportunity to perhaps share other stories that he has about Swamiji, and we'll do that a little bit and then leave time for you to ask questions if you would like.
Do we have time, or should we go right to questions?
I don't think with Kirtani's introduction of more stories of Swami that we will want to skip those. So if you would like to share a few, it would be wonderful.
Do you have something in mind? Okay. Well, she caught me off guard.
And I thought he was always ready to share a story.
But one very interesting one comes to mind. We were visiting, I was much younger on the path. I was at the village in Nevada City, California, and I had decided to do a weekend retreat, just a seclusion. So at the village we have this area that's called the seclusion retreat, and they had little cabins that you could go up to. So I decided I was going to do a little fast, and just a couple of day fast. So I took a nice big jug of spring water, really good pure water, and but I also decided that I wanted to try to do japa. And I thought it would be good not to take any reading material, nothing in there, and that as much as I could, I would just try to work with a particular affirmation and so one of my favorites has always been, "You are mine, I am thine. You are mine, I am thine." So I just repeated that mentally. I only had 2 days. I had Saturday and Sunday. And so I walked with it, I sat with it, but that was all the way to where I was going to go to bed. Even when I laid down and went to sleep, I was still trying to mentally hold on to this affirmation, "You are mine, I am thine." Sunday was the same way. I just tried to hold on to that. It really was a very, very wonderful seclusion, because I came out of that little fast and of those little practices very, very inspired. So Monday was the beginning of what we call at the Ananda village the winter renewal week. And so it was in the winter. It was by this time now it was evening, and it was Sunday night, and it was an orientation. It was beginning of this week. And so at the time the music group was called the Gandharvas, and the Gandharvas were singing, and I was sitting in the very back of the temple. There was only one seat of chairs behind me, and then there was the wall. So I sat back, and I was so very inspired from my weekend. And then the music and the singers and the words to the song and the harmonies, and I just felt practically floating in ecstasy. And I was aware that there was a little bit of movement behind me, in just the row behind. And then a moment later, there was this hand that reached up and just patted me on the shoulder, but of course from behind. And I glanced back just to see, and it was Swami. And he was sitting there waiting for the music to start. He was, of course, going to lead the week, but and so the music stopped, and he went up to the front of the onto the podium or onto the stage, and began this orientation in this week. And I remember thinking, as he led us in a short meditation, why sometimes am I so critical? At times I found that I would be critical of how he did things. I would think maybe a little bit like Judas in that story. I would think, well, why doesn't he behave this way? Doesn't he know that he could reach more people if he would just do this or do that? You know, I had these critical thoughts in my mind. But I was so inspired, and he gave such an inspiring talk, and I remember thinking, I just want to resolve to do away with that kind of critical thinking that I sometimes would fall into with people about how they could do it better. Why don't they see this, or why don't they see that? And you know, it was sort of the world, the democracy of, according to Mark. You know, my name was Mark at the time, and I could be a good president if people would just see it my way. And so I was so inspired, so I just refused. I mean, I just thought, I'm going to refuse to think this way again. And I really came away with just this new appreciation of Swami, especially because he just gave such an inspiring talk. And so everything was finished. And in the expanding light, there is the temple. There's a little corridor where people can put their shoes back on and things. But then there's another big sala, or big room, dining room. And I had already put my shoes on and come down into the big room, and I was standing way over to the side. And I watched up the stairs and on the platform where the corridor is, and Swami appeared in the door, and many people were talking with him, and it was the end of a very inspiring evening. And so he looked around and he saw me, and he came right down the stairs, right over to me. And one of the things that he had done was he had a book. He had pages, because often when he would write a new book, he would share it as one part of the discourse. He would share a particular chapter or a particular concept that he was writing about. And he came right up to me, to my face, and just gave me a big smile. And he took that bundle of papers and he swatted me on the backside, and then turned around and walked away. And I remember thinking, what do you do with that? I was like, he didn't say a word, but he smiled, and I can only think that he probably picked up a little bit on my whole process during the thing. And I think it was in his own way. He also was telling me he appreciated that I could arrive at the point where I had arrived. But it was just one of those things where he didn't judge. And I think he wanted us all to get in that space where we didn't judge. You just let the world go the way it does, because when it's outside of ourselves and when it deals with other people, we don't have any control. They're going to do what they do, and they're going to be the way they are. And we, in most cases, simply need to accept, unless we see that little window where we can help somebody, the best thing is just to love them, support them for the process that they're in and the process that they're going through. So in that respect, it was a story of Swami that was very meaningful to me.
This topic of how devotees rise, there was a situation after we had been in Assisi for a while. I went back to America and to the village, and it was a situation in which Swamiji was going to talk about the work in Italy. He was going to talk about how it came to happen and a little bit about it. And he called me that day and he said, "Kirtani, I want you to do this because you're living there, and I think it's good for them to hear it from you." Swamiji knew that for me it was very difficult to speak in public. It was not something that I ever did easily. And so, of course, if he asks, I'm not going to say, "No, Swamiji, I won't do it." So I was thinking about what I wanted to say, and I had it, pretty clear. And Swamiji was not planning to be there. That was what he said. I won't be there, but I would like you to talk about this. So I get there, and within 5 minutes, Swamiji arrives. And he walked up to me and he said, "You're still going to talk?" And I said, "Yes." And it was very interesting you could think, "Oh my gosh, Swamiji's here. That makes me more nervous." I got up to speak, and I don't think I've ever felt so relaxed and comfortable in speaking. And I knew that Swamiji was sitting there, sending energy, sending calmness, sending all of his support for my being up there speaking to people. And Swamiji was very good about challenging us to rise to our higher self. He didn't just reflect it and see it in us, but he would give us challenges. One of my biggest challenges came after Swamiji had made me a Kriyacharya. I was the first woman Kriyacharya, and I think it was that in itself was something that gave me pause. And I felt I really needed to do it well. And I think it was about 4 or 5 months that we were still here in Sisi before we ended up going to America for, it was probably a colony leaders conference. And I hadn't given Kriya yet. I kept thinking, well, I have to really be ready. I have to prepare myself. I have to go deeper. I have to, all of these things that were, myself, keeping myself from taking the challenge of doing what Swami had asked me to do. So we were at Swami's dome, and we were having a meeting of the colony leaders, and there was a tea break. And as I was chatting with a few of the other colony leaders, and Swamiji headed for his kitchen, and he just walked by, and he said, "I think you should do the Kriya this weekend." Or I want you to do the Kriya this weekend. And I just went into shock. You might think that anyone who's asked to be a Kriyacharya is absolutely ready, but of course, personally, if you think about it, you always think that you're not ready. So there was, again, how was I going to say no to Swamiji? And that was all he said. Those of you who know Vidura, he was supposed to give the Kriya, and he said, "Don't worry, I'll give you all the notes. I have everything that you need in order to do the Kriya initiation."
He was probably happy, like.
And Jyotish also, he said, "I can give you the clues about how to do this." So I had their help. It was actually, I think I had a day to prepare. So I stayed in silence, and I was in seclusion, and I prepared as best I could. And the Kriya happened. Swamiji I think I called Swamiji before and asked for his blessing, and he said, "Of course you have it." And I did the Kriya, and I remember coming back and calling Swamiji and saying, well, it was a beautiful experience, but I know that in the future I'll do better. I said, I will be able to give more thought and more study to the Kriya. And Swamiji only said a very few words. He said, "And more attunement to Master." And I realized that for Swamiji, it didn't matter, how much study, how well somebody gives a Kriya. The most important thing to him was my rising to the deeper attunement with Master that comes through any challenge that you are given of something to do. When you are sharing in any way that challenges you with other people about our teachings, the whole point is that it just brings you to a deeper attunement with Master. And since then, that's always been my key. When you are preparing anything, that if you are able to meditate deeply and go into that space within where you are in touch with Master and more deeply in tune with Master and with Swamiji and God and Divine Mother, that what happens is what they want to have happen through you. And this is what rising as a devotee means, that we really attune ourselves to that consciousness that helps us to bring our own consciousness to a higher level and be able to share ever more deeply.
I think it's above the hour, on the top of the hour. No, it's at the bottom of the hour for you, isn't it? So I don't know if we have time or if we should close it.
Well, let me see if we have. Do we have anyone have a question? You can always be relied upon.
Is beyond what Swamiji and Master have given us, like in chanting or reading the works that they have written and practicing these things. Beyond this, is there any further advice for us that you can give for deeper attunement with Master?
It reminds me a little bit of a question that I think it was a scientist that was asking Master, but I can't think of a lot of other things to say over and above what our line of gurus has given us, except to emphasize again that answer that Master gave to that scientist, which is love God. And it's inspiring to me also that Sri Yukteswar, such a man of wisdom and sort of stern countenance, but he said you can't put another foot in front of the other on the spiritual path without first developing love. And so we can see that the world needs it, and there's just an incredible amount of confusion and lack of direction and lack of that brotherhood and harmony. And I remember a particular talk where Master said, especially about, because he wanted to develop a new kind of ashram, a new kind of monastery, and he called it World Brotherhood Colonies. He said he has that one tape where he says to the governor, the lieutenant governor, who, when he was dedicating Lake Shrine, Governor, he said, I hope you will promote this idea of colonies where we can develop character for the youth, and where we can have job, church, house, school, and spiritual freedom in the same place. But then he said, but you can't have these without harmony, without brotherhood. And so love is really what is the base of it. And so I can't think of another philosophically thing I say on top of what the masters have given us, but that's certainly one of the practices that we can do, is just to try to develop the natural love of the heart and to try to be a channel for that.
I think one of the things that helps me most to tune in, I mean, how much of my day do I go through without actually thinking of Master, of Swamiji, of our divine inspiration? We get so busy, we get so caught up in what we're doing. And we are creatures of habit. And so I think we can create the habit of asking really often during our day, Master, what would you do in this moment? What would you say? How would you act? What would be your decision? And to always feel that we can ask. They want us, the Masters, to be that close to them, as though they are here at our side, and they're just waiting for us to ask, to tune in to what they would do, what they would say. And I think when we can create that habit and have that be a habit in our daily life, it will be a habit in our meditation, and they will be right there with us helping us to also make our meditations ever deeper so that we can be more in tune.
Thank you. My name is Prasanna.
Your name is?
Prasanna.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you. I've seen you before.
One last question. Anybody?
Love God is pretty
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Love God is a good closing note, Darmini was saying. It answers all the other questions as well.
Do you want to do the peace and harmony prayer?
Yeah.
Affirmation, I should say. Okay.
So, with eyes closed, with our focus at the spiritual eye, let's speak these words from our heart with love and from our highest consciousness. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony.
Lord, fill this world
Work with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Lord, fill this world with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Lord, fill me with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Lord, fill me with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. Lord, fill me with peace and harmony. Peace and harmony. And let's imprint that peace and harmony in this world, chanting Om 3 times. God and Gurus bless you all, and thank you for this opportunity.